"Get out, Sinclair," Julian sneered, tossing a cheap black pen onto my mahogany desk. "You're fired. Leave the clients. Pack your trash." I looked at the pen, then at him. He thought he just won. He had no idea he just signed his own eviction notice. For 15 years, I had built the backbone of Vance Asset Management. I had survived market crashes, SEC audits, and the late-night panic of high-net-worth clients who controlled the lifeblood of our firm. I managed a $1.2 billion portfolio. In our world, client trust isn't bought. It is forged in blood and compliance paperwork. Julian Vance, the founder's 32-year-old nephew, thought wealth was just a game of numbers on a screen. He was about to find out how wrong he was. My morning routine for the last 15 years had started exactly at 5:30 in the morning. I liked the silence of the office before the traders arrived. I liked the hum of the HVAC units on the 42nd floor of the Vance Tower in downtown Boston. I liked the smell of fresh espresso and the green glow of my dual Bloomberg terminals. Harold Vance, the founder of the firm, used to sit in the office next to mine. He was a veteran of the markets who knew that client relationships were built on consistency. When Harold hired me back in 2011, the firm only managed $300 million. I brought in my own contacts, built proprietary tools, and slowly grew our assets under management. By the time Harold retired in the spring of 2025 due to early onset Parkinson's, we were managing $1.8 billion. Of that total, $1.2 billion belonged to my three primary accounts: the City Pension Fund, the Geller Trust, and the Thorn Foundation. I did not just manage their money, I managed their anxieties. Howard Jenkins, the trustee for the City Pension Fund, was a 55-year-old bureaucrat who called me every single Tuesday at 8:15 sharp. He did not want to talk to an artificial intelligence or a junior analyst. He wanted to hear my voice confirming that our volatility boundaries were within the agreed-upon limits. Peter Geller, the 58-year-old director of the Geller Trust, was a reclusive family office manager who required daily customized disquiddity reports. Elizabeth Thorne, the 50-year-old director of the Thorn Foundation, trusted me to filter every single trade through a complex ESG matrix that I had personally designed. To keep these clients happy, I had created a proprietary piece of software back in 2015 called Sentinel Rebalance. It was an algorithmic engine that linked our portfolio management system directly to the custody accounts at State Street. I had built it under my personal holding company, Sinclair Analytics LLC, and licensed it to Vance Asset Management for a nominal fee of $50,000 a month. The software did something our standard enterprise platforms could not. It automatically ran real-time compliance checks against the specific bylaws of our largest clients. If a trade threatened to violate the City Pension Fund's leverage caps or the Thorn Foundation's environmental exclusions, the system blocked it instantly. The license agreement I drafted with Harold was simple. Vance Asset Management had the right to use the software, but the license was explicitly tied to my active employment. If I left or was terminated, the software license was revoked immediately. When Harold retired, he made the mistake of handing the CEO chair to his nephew, Julian. Julian was 32, had a fresh MBA from an Ivy League school, and possessed the dangerous combination of supreme arrogance and complete operational ignorance. He viewed our seasoned staff as overhead and our established clients as captive cash cows. Along with Julian came Clara Hensley, his 29-year-old fiancée. Clara had a background in luxury retail merchandising, but was immediately appointed as the Deputy Director of Client Relations. She had no licensing, no financial credentials, and no understanding of fiduciary duty under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. Julian's first order of business was to establish what he called brand cohesion. He hired a consulting agency for $300,000, which produced a report stating that our firm's visual identity was fragmented. Julian's response was to issue a 50-page corporate branding manual. The manual dictated everything from the font size and email signatures to the specific type of pens we were allowed to use. According to Julian's consultants, blue ink conveyed trust and transparency, whereas black ink was clinical and negative. Therefore, black ink was banned. Every employee was issued box after box of cheap plastic blue gel pens emblazoned with the new Vance Asset Management logo. I ignored the policy. I had used a high-quality, refillable black fountain pen for 30 years. I signed my compliance documents in black ink. I signed my trade authorizations in black ink. When Howard Jenkins came to our office to sign the annual pension allocation renewal, I handed him a heavy black rollerball pen. To me, these branding rules were a distraction from the real work of protecting our clients' wealth in a volatile market. But to Julian, my refusal to use the cheap blue plastic pens was an act of open insubordination. He did not care that my portfolio generated 70% of the firm's revenue. He cared that I did not bow to his authority. By late 2026, the tension had reached a boiling point. The annual performance audit was approaching, and my contract stipulated that I was owed a 2% commission on the annual management fees generated by my portfolio. With my clients representing $1.2 billion under management, the annual fee was $18 million. My commission was $3.6 million, payable on November 15th. In early October, I noticed Julian and Clara spending an unusual amount of time reviewing my client files. They were downloading account statements, looking at the contact details for Howard Jenkins, Peter Geller, and Elizabeth Thorne, and scheduling private lunches with junior analysts on my team. I knew what they were planning. Julian wanted my $3.6 million commission. He figured that since the clients had been with the firm for over a decade, they were loyal to the Vance brand, not to me. He believed he could fire me for cause, save the commission, and transfer the $1.2 billion portfolio to Clara. It was a classic corporate wealth grab. I did not say a word. I did not argue. Instead, I quietly logged into my personal laptop, opened the files for Sinclair Analytics LLC, and reviewed the contract clauses. Then, I waited for Julian to make his move. The confrontation happened on a rainy Monday morning in mid-October. I had just finished my second cup of coffee when Julian's administrative assistant knocked on my door. She looked nervous, keeping her eyes fixed on the carpet. "Mr. Vance wants to see you in the main boardroom, Victor. Bring your active file directory." I checked my watch. It was 9:15. On my desk lay the trade authorization sheets for the previous Friday's rebalancing. Every single signature was written in my signature dark black ink, using the custom fountain pen my father had given me when I passed my chartered financial analyst exams 25 years ago. I picked up the sheets, slipped them into a folder, and walked down the long carpeted hallway toward the glass-fronted boardroom. When I entered, Julian was sitting at the head of the table. He had his sleeves rolled up, trying to look like a crisis manager. Clara was seated to his right, her laptop open, typing with long manicured nails. On the table between them was a stack of printed trade reports. Every page had yellow highlight marks, slashing across the bottom right corner, the exact spot where my black signature was located. Julian did not offer me a seat. He didn't even look up until I stood directly across from him. "Victor, we have a compliance issue," Julian began, his voice carrying that rehearsed corporate authority. "Our branding guidelines are not suggestions. They are operational standards designed to maintain client trust. Yet, for the past 18 months, you have systematically ignored the mandate to use our official blue ink. Every document you have processed is technically out of compliance with our brand guidelines." I leaned against the back of a leather chair. "You called me in here because of the color of my ink, Julian. I have managed a $1.2 billion book of business for 15 years. I have returned an average of 9.8% net of fees to our clients annually. The color of the ink on an internal trade authorization sheet does not affect the yield on a treasury bond. It affects our corporate identity." Julian snapped, slamming his hand down on the table. "It is a matter of discipline. If you cannot follow a simple directive regarding stationery, how can we trust you to follow our risk management frameworks? We did a full audit over the weekend. Clara found over 300 instances of non-compliance in your files this quarter alone." Clara nodded, giving me a cold, triumphant smile. "We have to maintain standards, Victor. If we let one partner act like he is above the rules, the whole firm suffers. I am taking over the client relations department, and I cannot have my team seeing you flout our directives." Julian leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Under Section 9 of your employment agreement, A material breach of company policy that is left uncured after written warning is grounds for immediate termination for cause. Since we sent out the company-wide branding memo last year, your continued use of black ink constitutes a willful breach. Therefore, Vance Asset Management is terminating your employment, effective immediately. For cause, the room was silent except for the hum of the office projector. I looked at the highlight marks on the papers. Julian was using a $3 blue gel pen as a lever to wipe out a $3.6 million commission that was due to me in exactly 4 weeks. If I was fired for cause, my commission was forfeited and my client portfolio would be handed directly to Clara. It was a crude, transparent play, but Julian thought he had covered all his bases. He had his HR director standing in the corner of the room, holding a folder containing my severance waiver. "You are terminating me for cause," I repeated, keeping my voice flat, devoid of any anger or panic. "Because of a pen." "That is correct," Julian said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. "Sign the termination receipt. You have 2 hours to pack your office. Any attempt to contact clients using company devices will be treated as a violation of your non-solicitation agreement. Clara will be taking over the city pension, Geller, and Thorn accounts. We have already drafted the transition notices." I looked at the termination receipt. I took out my black fountain pen, slowly unscrewed the cap, and signed my name in thick, dark black ink at the bottom of the page. I capped the pen, slid the paper back to Julian, and stood up. "Understood," I said. Julian looked at the black signature, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say anything. He had won, or so he thought. He had saved his firm $3.6 million and handed his fiancée the largest portfolio in the state. I walked back to my office. The traders were looking at me through the glass panels. Having already heard the rumors, I did not make a scene. I did not log into the company network to delete files. I did not copy client databases. That would have violated my SEC obligations and given Julian legal grounds to sue me. Instead, I opened my desk drawer and took out my personal belongings. I took my framed photos, my father's desk clock, and 2 small physical items: the hardware security keys that held the encryption tokens for Sinclair Analytics LLC. These keys did not belong to Vance Asset Management. They were registered to my personal company. They were the physical gatekeepers to the Sentinel Rebalance platform. By 11 o'clock, I had packed my single cardboard box and walked out to the elevator lobby. The security guard, a man named Henderson whom I had known for 12 years, looked at the floor as the elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, rode it down to the parking garage, and put my box in the trunk of my sedan. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment listening to the rain beat against the windshield. I pulled out my personal cell phone. I did not use my company phone, which I had left wiped on my empty desk. I dialed Howard Jenkins' direct number. "Victor." Howard answered on the second ring. I was just looking at the weekly allocation sheet. "What is going on?" "Howard, I am calling to let you know that as of 11 o'clock this morning, I am no longer with Vance Asset Management," I said calmly. "What?" Howard's voice dropped. "What do you mean you are not with the firm? You manage our entire retirement fund. We have a board meeting tomorrow." "I cannot go into the details of my departure, Howard, but my contract has been terminated. Julian Vance will be assigning a new representative to your account. I believe it will be Clara Hensley." "Clara? Who the hell is Clara?" Howard sounded incredulous. "She doesn't have a track record." "Victor, you are the key man on our account. We have that written into our agreement." I thanked Howard for his trust over the years, hung up, and dialed Peter Geller. Then I dialed Elizabeth Thorne. I gave them the exact same message. I was gone and their accounts were being transferred to Clara Hensley. I did not ask them to leave the firm. I did not pitch my services. I simply stated the facts. By the time I put my car in gear and drove out of the garage, the first tremors of the earthquake were already heading toward the 42nd floor of the Vance Tower. When I arrived at my home in Back Bay, I did not pour a drink or pace the floor in anger. I went straight to my study, turned on my personal computer, and connected my physical security keys to the USB port. The screen lit up with the console for Sinclair Analytics LLC. Through this dashboard, I managed the Sentinel Rebalance software that was currently running as a background service on Vance Asset Management's secure servers. The software license agreement was a binding civil contract. Clause 7.3 of the agreement stated that the licensee, Vance Asset Management, was granted a non-transferable, revocable license to utilize the Sentinel Rebalance proprietary code, contingent upon the active employment of Victor Sinclair. In the event of termination of the said employee, the license would automatically terminate at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the day of termination. I looked at the system clock on my monitor. It was 12:40 p.m. I had exactly 5 hours before the automated script would run. I did not want to wait. I opened the AWS console, accessed the API gateway that allowed Vance's internal portfolio database to feed into my cloud-based compliance engine, and entered my master credential. With 3 clicks, I revoked the security certificates. I did not delete their data. That would be illegal. I simply shut down the communication pipeline between their local network and my proprietary engine. Instantly, the dashboard showed that the Vance Asset Management connection status shifted from active to unauthorized. Without Sentinel Rebalance, the firm could still trade manually, but they would have no automated compliance checks. For a retail investor, that might not matter. For institutional clients like the City Pension Fund, it was a disaster. If they executed a trade that violated their investment guidelines, they could face massive civil liability under federal retirement laws. Without my software, their traders would have to manually audit every single buy and sell order against hundreds of pages of client bylaws. It would slow their execution time from milliseconds to days. My next step was to review the client contracts. When I brought the City Pension Fund, the Geller Trust, and the Thorn Foundation to Vance Asset Management, I had insisted on drafting custom addendums to their investment advisory agreements. Under Clause 14.4, which we term the Keyman provision, the client's investment commitments were explicitly conditioned on my personal supervision of their accounts. The clause was clear. If Victor Sinclair ceases to serve as the primary portfolio manager for any reason, the client reserves the right to terminate this agreement immediately upon written notice, without incurring the standard 2% early withdrawal penalty. For the City Pension Fund, the standard withdrawal penalty on their $500 million portfolio was $10 million. The Geller Trust, it was $5 million. For the Thorn Foundation, it was $3 million. Without the Keyman clause, they were locked in. With it, they could walk away for free, taking their combined $900 million with them. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my personal phone began to ring. The first call was from Howard Jenkins of the City Pension Fund. "Victor, I just received an email from Julian Vance," Howard said, his voice tense. He sent over a transition document and introduced this Clara woman as our new portfolio director. We had a brief phone call, and she couldn't even explain the difference between a basis point and a yield curve. She tried to tell me that she would handle our asset allocation based on a new brand strategy. "I am representing the retirement savings of 40,000 city workers. I cannot let an unqualified novice manage our money." I understood his concern. "Howard, as of this morning, I have revoked the license for the Sentinel Rebalance software. Any trades executed by Vance Asset Management on your behalf are no longer running through my automated compliance filters." Howard gasped. "You are joking. We have strict ERISA mandates. If they buy a high-yield corporate bond that drops below investment grade and it doesn't get flagged, our board can be sued personally. They will have to run those audits manually now," I told him. "However, under Clause 14.4 of your advisory contract, you have the right to withdraw your funds without penalty due to my termination. I have already contacted a transition officer at BNY Mellon, one of our custody partners. If your board votes to terminate your agreement with Vance, BNY Mellon can custody the assets under an interim management agreement with my new firm, Sinclair Partners." "You have already set up a new firm?" Howard asked. "My registration for Sinclair Partners has been active as a shelf company for 5 years," I explained. "I keep the SEC compliance filings current just in case. I can be ready to manage your portfolio by Wednesday morning. I will call an emergency meeting of the trustees for 4 p.m. today," Howard said. "I want you on the conference line." 10 minutes after I hung up with Howard, Peter Geller called. He was even more direct. "Victor, this new girl, Clara, just called me to talk about our family trust's social media presence. She asked if we wanted to do a featured profile on their website. We are a private trust. We have spent 40 years avoiding the public eye. I told her to go to hell. What are our options? I explained the keyman clause and the software revocation. Peter did not hesitate. Send me the termination template. I will sign it and have my legal team file it with Vance's compliance officer before the market opens tomorrow. We are moving our $250 million to BNY Mellon under your management. By 4:30 p.m., Elizabeth Thorne had also confirmed that her foundation would be invoking the keyman clause. The board of the Thorne Foundation was scheduled to meet at 9:30 the next morning, and she assured me the vote would be unanimous. While the clients were mobilizing, the technical team at Vance Asset Management was beginning to panic. At exactly 5:30 p.m., the trading desk's terminals began flashing red warning messages. License key invalid. Contact Sinclair Analytics, LLC. The traders tried to run their end-of-day rebalancing sheets, but the system refused to execute the orders. Without the Sentinel API, their database could not connect to the State Street custody platform. Julian's chief technology officer, a young guy named Alan, tried to call my personal phone at 6 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. He left a frantic message, asking if there was a server outage or if I had forgotten to hand over the administrative passwords. He did not realize that the password was not the problem. The license was gone, and the intellectual property belonged to me. The trap was set, and Julian had walked right into it, carrying his blue pens. Tuesday morning at Vance Asset Management was a scene of absolute chaos. I knew this because one of my former senior analysts, a young man who had stayed behind, was sending me updates via encrypted messages. By 8:30 a.m., the trading floor was in a panic. The market had opened with a sudden downward turn in Treasury yields, requiring a rapid rebalancing of our interest rate hedge positions. Normally, Sentinel Rebalance would have processed the trade allocations across all three large portfolios in under 10 seconds, ensuring we did not violate any pension fund rules. Instead, the traders were sitting in front of locked screens. Without the API connection, they had to manually calculate the asset weights for each client on Excel spreadsheets. The head trader was screaming at Alan, the chief technology officer, who was sweatily typing commands into a command line terminal on the server rack. I can't bypass the encryption, Victor, Alan was saying, according to my analyst's text. The entire compliance database is hosted on Sinclair Analytics AWS instance. We don't have the source code. If we run these trades manually, we risk violating the city pension's volatility limits. It's a massive compliance risk. While the trading desk was paralyzed, the real disaster struck the executive suite. At 9:15 a.m., the firm's general counsel received a secure electronic delivery from the trustees of the City Pension Fund. It was a formal notice invoking Clause 14.4 of their investment advisory agreement. They were terminating their relationship with Vance Asset Management, effective immediately, and directing the custody bank to transfer their $500 million in assets to BNY Mellon under the management of Sinclair Partners. 10 minutes later, the Geller Trust's legal team delivered a similar document. They withdrew their $250 million. By 10 a.m., the Thorne Foundation's formal termination notice arrived, pulling their $150 million. In a single hour, Vance Asset Management had lost $900 million of its $1.8 billion assets under management. 50% of the firm's total book of business had vanished. The annual revenue of the company dropped by $13.5 million in a heartbeat. My phone rang at 10:30 a.m. The caller ID showed Julian's direct office line. I picked up and remained silent, waiting for him to speak. Victor, Julian's voice was tight, high-pitched with panic. What the hell did you do to our servers? We can't access the compliance engine. Our trading desk is frozen. I am no longer an employee of Vance Asset Management, Julian, I replied calmly. My license agreement for the Sentinel Rebalance software expired at 5:30 p.m. yesterday, as per Section 7.3 of the contract. Since you terminated my employment, you no longer have the legal right to run my software. You sabotaged our systems, Julian shouted. That is company property. I will have our legal team file an injunction against you before noon. We will sue you for damages and intellectual property theft. I took a slow sip of my coffee. You can try, Julian, but I suggest you read the software licensing agreement that your uncle Harold signed in 2015. Sinclair Analytics LLC owns the software and the code. Vance Asset Management was merely a licensee. The license was explicitly tied to my active employment. Since you terminated me, the license terminated. I did not steal anything. I simply stopped providing a service that you no longer pay for. Julian was quiet for a moment. He was likely looking at his screen, realizing his general counsel had just told him the same thing. "We can work this out, Victor," Julian said, his tone shifting from angry to desperate. "This is just a misunderstanding. We had a compliance dispute, but we can negotiate. If you turn the software back on and help Clara transition these accounts, we can talk about a consulting agreement. We will pay you a portion of your commission." "A portion?" I asked. "Julian, you terminated me to avoid paying a $3.6 million commission that I had already earned. You wanted to hand my portfolio to Clara to secure her a promotion she didn't earn. There is no negotiation. The commission is a debt you owe me for my work over the past year. My lawyers will be filing a claim for the full amount, plus interest, by the end of the week." "Victor, please," Julian stammered, and I could hear Clara talking loudly in the background. "The city pension, Jeller, and Thorn boards have all sent in termination notices. They are citing the keyman clause. You had no right to solicit them." "I did not solicit them, Julian. I called them to inform them of my departure, which I am legally required to do under SEC rules. They chose to leave because they do not trust you or Clara to manage their assets. They know she has no licensing. They know she has no experience. They value their money more than your branding guidelines. If you don't help us, the board is going to find out," Julian whispered. "The board meeting is tomorrow morning. If they see a 50% drop in AUM, they will remove me as CEO." I looked out my window at the Boston Harbor. "Then I suggest you start preparing your resignation speech, Julian. Because Howard Jenkins is already coordinating with the board of directors. He is a major shareholder in Vance Asset Management through the city's pension holding company. He has already called an emergency board session." "Wait, Victor," Julian started, but I pressed the end call button. I set my phone down. I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. I had not broken a single law. I had not violated my contract. I had simply practiced malicious compliance to the letter. Julian had wanted a firm run strictly by his branding manual, and now he had it. He had his blue pens, his empty desks, and a massive, gaping hole in his balance sheet. I opened my email and began reviewing the transition documents from BNY Mellon. My new firm, Sinclair Partners, was about to launch with $900 million in assets on day one. The Wednesday morning board meeting of Vance Asset Management was held in the same glass-fronted boardroom where I had been terminated 48 hours earlier. Julian and Clara had arrived early, hoping to present a slide deck that downplayed the loss of the accounts. They had prepared a marketing pitch about rebuilding the firm's brand around younger, more tech-focused client demographics. They had even placed boxes of the custom blue logo pens at every director's seat. But the board members were not interested in slide decks or marketing jargon. When Howard Jenkins entered the room, the atmosphere turned freezing. Howard was not just a client. The City Pension Fund's investment arm owned a 15% equity stake in Vance Asset Management, making him one of the largest shareholders in the company. He sat down next to Harold Vance, the founder, who had been wheeled in by his nurse. Harold looked frail, but his eyes were sharp and filled with a quiet rage. "Julian," Harold began, his voice raspy but steady. "You have been CEO for less than 2 years, and in that time, you have managed to lose 50% of our assets under management. You fired our top portfolio manager over the color of his pen. You shut down our primary compliance software because you didn't read the licensing contract. And you exposed this firm to a massive fiduciary lawsuit. Uncle Harold, we were implementing a brand modernization strategy." Julian stammered, his face turning pale. Victor Sinclair was insubordinate. He refused to follow corporate standards. "We had to establish authority." "You established stupidity," Harold snapped. "You fired a key man without checking his contract clauses or his software licenses. You handed his portfolio to Clara, who doesn't even hold a Series 7 registration. You have committed gross negligence." Howard Jenkins stood up, holding a folder of his own. The city pension fund has officially moved its $500 million to BNY Mellon under the management of Sinclair Partners, Howard announced. Furthermore, as a major shareholder of this firm, I am introducing a motion to remove Julian Vance as Chief Executive Officer for cause, effective immediately, and to terminate Clara Hensley's contract. The vote was quick and unanimous. Julian and Clara were escorted out of the building by the same security guards they had used to watch me pack my office. The blue pens they had distributed were left behind, scattered across the mahogany table like plastic junk. On Wednesday afternoon, Harold Vance called me. He did not use the company line. He called from his personal mobile phone. "Victor," Harold sighed, "I want to apologize for my nephew's arrogance. I should have never stepped away without ensuring the transition was secure. He was a fool. I appreciate that, Harold," I said. "But the damage is done. The clients have moved." "I know," Harold said. "I am not asking you to return. You have your own firm now, and you will do well. I am calling to clean up the mess. My lawyers have reviewed your commission claim. We are transferring the full $3.6 million to your bank account today. We will not contest it. Thank you, Harold. That is the correct decision." "We also have another issue," Harold continued. "The remaining $900 million of assets under management at our firm are still blocked. We cannot run our rebalancing schedules without Sentinel Rebalance. Our traders are drowning in manual checks. Will you license the software back to us?" I smiled, holding my black fountain pen. "I can license the software to Vance Asset Management, Harold. But the terms have changed. The monthly licensing fee is now $100,000, double the previous rate. And the license will be managed month to month, revocable at my discretion." Harold was silent for a few seconds. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "Double," he finally said. "That is the price for compliance security, Harold. It is far cheaper than the regulatory fines you will face if your traders make a manual error." "Understood," Harold said quietly. "Send over the new agreement. We will sign it." By Friday afternoon, the transition was complete. The wire transfer of $3.6 million had cleared into my personal account. The new license agreement for Sentinel Rebalance was signed, and I restored the API connection for Vance's remaining clients, immediately netting Sinclair Analytics LLC $100,000 a month in recurring revenue. At the same time, Sinclair Partners opened its doors in a new office suite overlooking the Boston Harbor. We had $900 million in assets under management from day one, representing the City Pension Fund, the Geller Trust, and the Thorne Foundation. Without the overhead of the Vance corporate structure, my management fee revenues were higher than they had ever been, and I did not have to share 80% of them with a bloated corporate hierarchy. My first week in the new office was busy. I spent the afternoon signing new custody agreements, compliance manuals, and client onboarding packets. Howard Jenkins came by on Friday afternoon to sign the final pension allocation sheets. He sat across from my new glass desk, looking out at the container ships moving across the harbor. He smiled as he took out his own pen, a heavy black lacquer rollerball. "No blue ink here, Victor?" Howard joked. "No, Howard," I said, picking up my father's old black fountain pen. "In this office, we write in black. It is clear, it is permanent, and it is the color of a clean balance sheet." I signed the final page of the city pension agreement in thick, dark black ink. Julian Vance had wanted to build a brand based on colors and corporate guidelines. He had succeeded in branding himself as an incompetent novice, while my black pen had written the script for my independence. I capped the pen, shook Howard's hand, and looked forward to the next 15 years.